Hi, I'm Warren Sprouse. I'm the host of the Bible Forum. Right here every Sunday night from 8 to 10 p.m. We broadcast live. We produce these YouTubes that you can then pass around or look in some other place. We're at our website, thebibleforum.net. You can go there if you'd like to see more and peruse that website or some of the other ones. We have other websites, a counseling website and a more secular oriented website, The View from Zoar, talks about end times kinds of situations, or livinggodly.net. Today I wanted to talk to you about a subject that has just been going on forever. You weren't paying a whole lot of attention to it. I call it the well-worn slide. And it's been doing this ever since the devil figured out that this was a good way. Charles Spurgeon was a preacher going back to the 19th century, late 19th century in Great Britain, who was involved with, and I think he coined the phrase, the downgrade controversy. And he did this responding to what was before that German liberalism that was creeping into the church. If you go online to the Spurgeon archive, it has a report there that says that as pastors and churches began to move away from their Puritan roots, quote, many purposely concealed their skepticism and heresy, preferring to sow seeds of doubt while posing as Orthodox believers, end of quote. The report is that, quote, many of those who remained true to the faith were nevertheless reluctant to fight for what they believed in. Preaching was often cold and lifeless, and even those who held to sound doctrine were careless about where they drew the line in their associations with others, end of quote. We saw it in our country in the early 20th century as Orthodox Christian groups worked to maintain what they called the fundamentals of the faith. A task was begun to compile what they called a compendium of articles defending the scriptures. And this task was first given to A.C. Dixon, then to Lewis Meyer, and then ultimately to R.A. Torrey, who was president of Moody Bible Institute. They compiled the works of many conservative writers and issued them in 12 volumes. Later they were printed in 4-volume set that Cyrus McCormick, inventor and founder of International Harvester Company, paid to have shipped to every pastor, every church in America, 30,000 of them. In the mid-20th century, the battle was engaged again, this time with those who rejected the label fundamental. They wanted an easier road, a more palatable gospel. In their view, fundamentalists had become harsh and rigid, and so they called themselves evangelicals after the gospel, the great evangel. In less than 20 years, this group, known as evangelicals, had moved away from their roots to begin a movement known as New Evangelicalism. A man by the name of Harold J. Ockenga coined that term. He was the head of fledgling Fuller Theological Seminary, and in the late 1940s, in 1948 or 49, I believe it was, he coined the term New Evangelicalism to describe this breakaway group. Its mission was to build bridges to the culture rather than stand off and away from it as the fundamentalists prescribed. By the 1980s, just about every evangelical in America was actually new evangelical. The religious right today is made up of new evangelicals, seeking to impact the world for Christ through social activism and political involvement. In the 1960s, evangelicalism was assaulted by charismatics, the charismatic movement with their tongues and individual prayer language. Their effort as they moved into other churches was to stay under the radar and use the prayer language as a tool. They didn't care what you did. We had this. But little by little, they were influencing other people until soon there wasn't a church in America that hadn't been impacted by the charismatic renewal. In the 1990s, it was Benny Hinn, the disciple of Pentecostal mystic Catherine Kuhlman, who captivated the minds and hearts of evangelicals with his exaggerated expressions of what he called the power of the Holy Spirit. In the late 20th century, the National Association of Evangelicals was completely taken over by charismatics, a group that had been rejected because of their false doctrines just 20 years earlier. In the 21st century, the evangelical church is open to almost anything, from divorce to abortion to homosexuality to transgenderism. Nothing is off limits. But in each case, the pattern was the same. Change the conversation by changing the terminology. Downplay the rigid standards for an easier, more Christian approach to people who are different from us. Bring apostates in as musicians and or worship leaders. Refuse to be critical about the music, about the new structure, about even sin. And do all of that for the sake of unity. Large apostate churches became models of what could be done. If folks just relaxed a little bit, the contemporary church was born. The goats were now viewed as sheep, and the leadership was being drawn from this pool. Today, it's accepting the gay lifestyle as normal and Christian. And the tactics are exactly the same. Prey on the emotions of those who are straight. Make sure they feel their resistance or rejection as unloving or unchristian. Work on those who have no real foundation in Christian doctrine to open that door just a little bit wider. Changing the terminology. It's no longer sodomy. It's gay. It's no longer sin. It's just different. How's that working out? Just like clockwork. Willow Creek Church in Illinois was at the forefront of the contemporary Christian music movement. That group has openly embraced now a gay worship leader who says he is now celibate, and describes himself as gay. I'm a gay celibate man. But he's also actively and openly advocating for Matthew Vines. Matthew Vines is an open homosexual. Matthew Vines considers himself a Christian and is actively seeking to find weak sisters to influence and thereby undermine the system. He says he's making progress. He has an organization called the Reformation Project Conference, and it's designed to train and equip leaders to advocate for homosexual Christians. Matthew brags about the number of pastors he's been able to meet in small venues, softening the hearts and hard soil with his earnestness, niceness, and ability to make worldly reason sound so right. The New York Times did an article on this whole phenomenon called Evangelicals Open Doors to Debate on Gay Rights. That was on June 8th of 2015. In there they claim, quote, Mr. Vines says he has held about 36 meetings all over the country in the last year with evangelical leaders who oppose his ideas. Some of the gatherings have been public and high profile. Most of his meetings have been private. He has talked with small groups of pastors. in both Phoenix and Nashville and shared his story over coffee or lunch, often one-on-one, in places like Atlanta, Chicago, Orlando, Florida, Portland, Oregon, Greenville, South Carolina. He also visited the campuses of Focus on the Family. That was in February, at the invitation of Mr. Stanton, and talked with more than 20 staff members about the psychic and spiritual damage inflicted on young gay Christians by ministries like Focus. Is he winning converts? Well, not in the classic way, but he's winning a hearing. All we need to do now is to watch the evangelical world as it opens its doors for him to come and to speak. He might be in a church near you one day, or maybe to debate in a public conference of some sort, a venue, or maybe just to meet with your pastor or other Christian leaders in town to discuss. Watch as otherwise good men begin to use words that are softer, more embracing, and then watch the wall start to come down. Because it's a tried and true system. It works. It has worked in denominations. It has worked in families. The question is, will it work in your church?